The morning bells rang across Galactic Academy as students rushed to their first classes. Hyun walked slowly through the main hallway, watching other students hurry past him. The tall, blue-skinned Xanthari students moved in groups while the crystal, like Vex Tai students, floated just above the ground. Everyone seemed excited about something, but Hyun could not figure out what it was. He entered his advanced xenobiology classroom and took his usual seat in the back row. The room buzzed with whispered conversations and nervous energy. Hyun heard fragments of words like dangerous and death world and human. His curiosity grew stronger as he listened to his classmates talk in hushed voices. Professor Kyle entered the classroom looking more nervous than usual. The elderly Xanthari professor had taught at the academy for over 30 years, but today his hands shook slightly as he set down his teaching materials. He cleared his throat several times before speaking to the class. "Students, please take your seats," he announced in a shaky voice. "Today we have a very special announcement. For the first time in Academy history, we will be hosting a student from a class Thoth and Death World." The room fell completely silent at these words. A class thus. Death World was the most dangerous classification possible. These planets were so hostile that most galactic species could not survive there for even a few minutes. Only the most extreme life forms could evolve and thrive in such deadly environments. "The human will be joining our class today," Professor Kyle continued. "I must remind you all that special safety protocols are now in effect. Please maintain appropriate distance and avoid any sudden movements that might be interpreted as threatening." Hyun felt his heart beat faster. He had heard stories about humans and their terrible homeworld called Earth. The stories described creatures that could survive in poison air and crushing gravity. They were said to be nearly indestructible and extremely dangerous to civilized species. The classroom door opened and everyone turned to look. A figure walked in that made the entire room gasp in surprise. The human looked nothing like the monsters from the scary stories. She appeared to be a young female with brown hair tied back in a simple style. Her clothes were plain and ordinary. She carried herself with calm confidence that seemed almost casual. "This is Mina," Professor Kyle said quickly. "She will be studying with us for the remainder of the semester. Mina, please take the available seat near the front." Hyun watched as Mina walked to the empty desk. Every student in her path leaned away from her as if she carried some invisible disease. The large Corvin, students who usually intimidated everyone else, pressed themselves against the walls. Even the normally fearless Vex Tai students dimmed their natural glow and tried to make themselves smaller. Mina seemed completely unaware of the fear she was causing. She sat down calmly and pulled out what looked like standard note-taking materials. Her movements were smooth and controlled in a way that made Hyun think of predators he had seen in nature documentaries. Professor Kale began his lecture about atmospheric adaptation, but his voice remained shaky. When he mentioned the toxic effects of high oxygen environments, several students glanced nervously at Mina. She raised her hand politely to ask a question. "Professor, I do not understand why oxygen is considered toxic," the human said in a clear voice. "On Earth, we breathe oxygen every day from birth. It is completely normal for humans." The professor nearly dropped his teaching tablet at this casual statement. Several students in the front row actually moved their desks backward. The idea that someone could breathe pure oxygen without dying was beyond their understanding. "How much oxygen is in Earth's atmosphere?" Professor Kale asked carefully, as if he was afraid of the answer. "About 21%, Mina replied without concern. Sometimes higher in forests and near oceans. We need it to survive." A Xanthari student named Bong made a choking sound and had to be helped from the room. The concentration of oxygen that humans considered normal would burn the lungs of most galactic species within seconds. The class continued with Mina participating naturally in discussions. When the topic moved to gravity adaptation, she mentioned that Earth gravity was actually moderate for human development. The professor had to sit down when he realized that what humans called normal gravity would crush most other species. During break time, Hyun noticed that none of the other students would go near Mina. She sat alone at her desk, reading ahead in the textbook while everyone else gathered in the far corners of the room. The whispered conversations grew louder as students shared their shock about what they had just learned. "Did you hear what she said about breathing poison?" asked a vexed Thai student. "And that gravity would kill us instantly," added another. The fear in the room was thick enough to touch, but Hyun found himself feeling more curious than afraid. When classes resumed, Mina continued to answer questions with frightening casualness. She mentioned that Earth had weather patterns that included frozen, water falling from the sky, and winds that could destroy buildings. She spoke about seasons where the temperature dropped below the freezing point of water, as if this was pleasant. The professor asked about Earth's wildlife, expecting to hear about small, harmless creatures. Mina described animals called tigers that could weigh over 300 kilograms and hunt humans for food. She mentioned creatures called sharks that lived in Earth's oceans and had rows of razor-sharp teeth. Every new detail made the other students more terrified. By lunchtime, the entire academy was buzzing with news about the human student. Students who had not seen her yet gathered around those who had been in her classes. The stories grew more dramatic with each telling, but the truth was already frightening enough. Hyun followed Mina to the cafeteria from a safe distance. He watched as she selected food that looked normal, but probably would have killed any other student. She sat alone at a table while hundreds of other students stared at her from across the room. The human ate her meal calmly, seeming completely unaware that she had become the most feared student in academy history. Hyun wondered if all the stories about humans were true or if they were exaggerated. Looking at Mina, she seemed almost ordinary, except for the way she moved with perfect control and confidence. As the day ended, Hyun realized that everything was about to change at Galactic Academy. The arrival of a single human student had shaken the foundation of what everyone thought they knew about the galaxy. Tomorrow would bring new questions and new fears as students tried to understand what it meant to share their school with a creature from the most dangerous world known to exist. The human named Mina had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same again. 3 days had passed since Mina arrived at Galactic Academy, and the fear had only grown stronger. Students walked different routes to avoid crossing her path. Teachers spoke in whispers when she was nearby. The cafeteria fell silent whenever she entered to get her meals. Taek watched all of this with growing anger. The 6-foot-tall Corvin had built his reputation as the Academy's most feared bully over the past 2 years. His species was naturally larger and stronger than most others, which made intimidation easy. His family's wealth and political connections meant he never faced real consequences for his actions. Every student in the academy knew to stay out of Taek's way. He had made examples of scholarship students and aliens from less developed worlds. Teachers looked the other way when he demanded homework from weaker students or took their lunch money. His gang of followers laughed at his cruel jokes and helped him corner victims. But now everyone was afraid of some small human girl instead of him. Students who used to cower before Taek now spoke only about the dangerous Death Worlder in their classes. His reputation was being overshadowed by someone who looked like she could barely reach his shoulder. Taek did not believe the stories about humans being dangerous. How could such a small creature be more frightening than him? His species had conquered 12 star systems through military might. One little girl from some backward planet could not possibly be a real threat. He gathered his usual group of followers around him as they planned their next move. Jin and Wook were both Corvins, like him, and enjoyed watching him humiliate other students. They had helped him establish dominance over the academy through years of carefully planned intimidation. "Look at everyone acting scared of that tiny human," Take said with disgust. She probably comes from some primitive world where they have never seen real technology. I bet she has never even been in a real fight. His followers nodded in agreement, though Wook looked slightly uncertain. He had been in the xenobiology class when Mina casually mentioned breathing poison air and surviving, crushing gravity. Something about the way she spoke made him nervous. We need to show everyone who really runs this academy, Tyke continued. If we can make the famous humans submit to us, then everyone will remember who they should really fear. They watched as Mina entered the cafeteria for lunch. She moved through the serving line, selecting her food, while other students gave her a wide space. Her movements were fluid and controlled like a dancer, but there was something predatory about the way she scanned the room. Mina found an empty table near the center of the cafeteria and sat down alone. She opened her meal and began eating calmly while hundreds of students watched her from safe distances. The normal chatter of lunchtime had been replaced by nervous whispers and stolen glances. "This is perfect," Tyke announced to his followers. "Everyone will see us put the human in her place. After today, no one will question who really controls this academy." Tyke stood up and walked toward Mina's table with Jin and Wook following behind him. The cafeteria grew even quieter as students realized what was about to happen. Some began moving toward the exits, while others pulled out their communication devices to record whatever was coming. Mina continued eating without looking up as Tyke approached her table. She seemed completely unaware that the academy's most dangerous bully was walking straight toward her. Her calm behavior only made Take more angry, since he was used to students showing fear the moment they saw him coming. Well, what do we have here?" Take said loudly, so everyone in the cafeteria could hear him. The famous human from the scary death world. "You do not look so dangerous to me." Mina took another bite of her food without responding. She did not even glance up at Tyke, who was now standing directly beside her table. Her apparent indifference made him clench his fists in rage. "I am talking to you," human, Take snarled. "When I speak, you are supposed to listen and show respect. Maybe they do not teach manners on primitive worlds like yours." Still, Mina said nothing. She finished chewing and reached for her drink while Tyke's face grew darker with anger. His followers exchanged worried looks as they realized their leader was becoming truly furious. "Fine," Tyke shouted. "If you want to act like you cannot hear me, then maybe you need a lesson in proper behavior." He reached out and swept Mina's lunch tray off the table with a violent motion. Food scattered across the floor while her drink splashed against the nearby wall. The crash echoed through the silent cafeteria as every student held their breath. Mina slowly set down her fork and looked up at Tyke for the first time. Her expression was calm, but something in her eyes made several of the smarter students begin backing away from the scene. Wook grabbed Jin's arm and tried to pull him toward the exit. "You made a mess," Mina said quietly. Her voice was steady, but carried an undertone that made the hair on Hyun's neck stand up from across the room. "What are you going to do about it?" human Take demanded. "Are you going to clean it up like a good little servant, or do I need to teach you some respect the hard way?" Mina stood up slowly. Her movements were completely controlled and graceful in a way that reminded several students of the dangerous predators they had seen in nature documentaries. She was significantly shorter than Take, but somehow her presence seemed to fill the space around her. "You should walk away now," Mina said in the same quiet voice. "This does not have to become a problem." Take laughed loudly at what he saw as a pathetic attempt at intimidation. The idea that this small human could threaten him was ridiculous. He had beaten students twice her size without breaking a sweat, or what tiny human Tyke mocked. "What exactly are you going to do to me? You probably have never even been in a real fight before today." The cafeteria had become completely silent. Even the kitchen staff had stopped working to watch what was happening. Students pressed themselves against the walls or hid behind overturned tables. The tension in the air was so thick it felt hard to breathe. Mina looked directly into Tyke's eyes, with an expression that was perfectly calm. There was no anger or fear in her face, just a kind of cold calculation that made him hesitate for just a moment. Something deep in his brain was sending warning signals that he chose to ignore. "Last chance," Mina said simply. Tyke raised his hand high above his head, preparing to strike what he assumed would be an easy target. He expected her to flinch or beg for mercy like all his previous victims. Instead, she stood perfectly still, watching his movement with the focus of a scientist studying an interesting specimen. Time seemed to slow as Tyke's hand began its downward arc toward Mina's face. In that moment, he was completely confident that he was about to reassert his dominance over the Academy. He had no idea that he was making the biggest mistake of his life. The next 3 seconds would change everything. The first second began as Tyke's hand swept downward toward Mina's face. He put all his strength behind the blow, expecting to send the small human crashing to the ground. His followers watched with excitement while other students covered their eyes in fear. The cafeteria held its breath as the strike approached its target, but Mina did not flinch or try to dodge. Instead, she moved with speed that seemed impossible for any living creature. Her left hand shot up and caught Tyke's wrist in mid-swing, stopping his attack completely. The sound of her grip tightening around his bones was audible across the silent room. Tyke's confident expression changed to shock as he realized his hand was trapped. He tried to pull free, but Mina's grip was like a steel clamp that would not budge. Her fingers pressed into his wrist with enough force to make the bones grind against each other. He had never felt strength like this before. At the exact same moment, her right hand drove upward in a perfectly aimed strike. The blow connected with Tyke's jaw at the precise angle needed to cause maximum damage. The impact created a sound like thunder that echoed off the cafeteria walls and made several students scream in terror. The force behind Mina's punch was beyond anything the witnesses could understand. Students later compared it to being hit by a speeding transport vehicle or struck by industrial machinery. The power generated by her human muscles was focused into a single devastating point of contact. The second saw Tyke's feet leave the ground as the incredible force lifted his entire body weight into the air. His head snapped backward with enough speed to cause serious injury to his neck and spine. Students watched in horror as his jaw visibly dislocated from the point of impact. The sound of breaking bones filled the cafeteria as multiple fractures occurred simultaneously. His orbital socket cracked under the transmitted force while his cheekbones shattered into several pieces. Blood began flowing from his mouth and nose as internal damage mounted rapidly. Wook and Jin stood frozen in terror as they watched their leader's body fly through the air. The Corvin who had seemed invincible just moments before now looked like a broken toy thrown by an angry child. They could not comprehend how someone so much smaller could generate such devastating power. Several students who had been recording the confrontation dropped their devices in shock. The footage they captured would later be analyzed frame by frame by medical experts trying to understand exactly what had happened. The speed and precision of Mina's response defied everything they knew about biology. Hyun watched from across the room as time seemed to move in slow motion. He could see the exact moment when Taek realized he had made a terrible mistake. The bully's expression changed from confidence to confusion to pure terror as he understood that he was completely helpless. The third second brought Taek crashing back down to the cafeteria floor with tremendous force. His body hit the hard surface and bounced once before settling into a motionless heap. Blood immediately began pooling beneath his head as his breathing became shallow and labored. His face was already swelling beyond recognition as the full extent of his injuries became visible. The right side of his head looked like it had been hit with a sledgehammer. His jaw hung at an unnatural angle while his eye was swollen completely shut. Mina stood over the unconscious bully looking completely calm and relaxed. She was not even breathing hard from the exertion, as if the devastating attack had required no effort at all. Her clothes remained neat, and her hair was still perfectly in place. The silence in the cafeteria stretched for several more seconds as everyone tried to process what they had just witnessed. Hundreds of students stared at the scene, unable to believe that such a small person could cause such massive damage with a single punch. A vexed-eyed student near the front finally broke the silence with a piercing scream that snapped everyone back to reality. Other students began shouting for medical assistance while some ran toward the exits in panic. The calm of lunchtime had been shattered by 3 seconds of violence. Mina calmly picked up her scattered belongings from the floor where Take had knocked them. She showed no signs of concern about the severely injured student at her feet or the chaos erupting around her. Her actions seemed as routine as cleaning up a simple mess. Jin and Wook finally broke free from their shock and rushed to their fallen leader's side. They knelt beside Take's broken body, trying to wake him up, but receiving no response. His breathing was so weak they feared he might die before help arrived. The Academy's emergency medical team burst through the cafeteria doors within minutes of being called. The paramedics took one look at Take's injuries and immediately called for additional support. They had never seen damage this severe from a simple fight between students. As they worked to stabilize his condition, the lead medic kept glancing at Mina with a mixture of fear and amazement. The precision of the injuries suggested someone with advanced medical knowledge of exactly where and how to strike for maximum effect. Students began evacuating the cafeteria under orders from arriving security officers. Everyone moved carefully around Mina, giving her an even wider space than before. The casual way she had destroyed their most feared bully had elevated her from mysterious to absolutely terrifying. Dr. Yoon arrived and immediately began scanning Taek's injuries with portable medical equipment. His expression grew more concerned, with each reading as the full scope of the damage became clear. Multiple fractures, severe swelling, possible brain trauma, and significant blood loss. How did this happen? Dr. Yoon demanded, looking around at the shocked students. What could cause injuries this severe? Several witnesses tried to explain, but their accounts seemed impossible to believe. A single punch from a human girl had completely destroyed a Corvan warrior who outweighed her by over 50 kilograms. The physics should not have allowed such a result. Mina finished gathering her things and walked calmly toward the cafeteria exit. Students pressed themselves against the walls to avoid being anywhere near her path. The sound of her footsteps echoed in the sudden quiet as everyone held their breath until she was gone. Within minutes, the news of what had happened began spreading throughout the academy like wildfire. Students called friends and family to tell them about the incredible scene they had witnessed. The human had not just won a fight, she had completely annihilated her opponent with ease. As Taek was loaded onto a medical transport for emergency surgery, the full reality of the situation began to sink in. The Academy's most dangerous bully had been reduced to a broken, unconscious mess by someone who looked like she could barely hurt a small animal. The 3 seconds that changed everything were over, but their consequences would reshape the entire Academy forever. The medical wing of Galactic Academy had never seen injuries quite like the ones covering Taek's broken body. Dr. Yoon stood over the diagnostic table, staring at readouts that seemed impossible to believe. In his 30 years as a medical professional, he had treated victims of vehicle accidents, industrial disasters, and military combat, but nothing compared to this. The scanner showed fractures in 4 separate locations along Taek's jawbone. His right orbital socket was completely shattered with bone fragments scattered throughout the surrounding tissue. The cheekbone was broken into 7 distinct pieces that would require careful reconstruction. Swelling had closed his eye completely and threatened his vision permanently. "How can one punch cause this much damage?" Dr. Yoon muttered to his assistant. "The force required would have to be enormous, but there are no signs of weapons or mechanical enhancement." His assistant, a young Zenthari named Dr. Kim, pulled up the security footage on her tablet. They watched in slow motion as Mina's fist connected with Tyke's face. The impact looked almost casual, but the results spoke for themselves. Look, at the precision Dr. Kim observed, pointing at the screen. She struck at the exact angle needed to cause maximum structural damage. This was not a wild swing or lucky hit. Someone trained her to fight this way. Dr. Yoon nodded grimly as he prepared for what would be the most complex reconstruction surgery of his career. The operating room had to be specially configured with additional equipment brought in from other medical facilities. The surgery would take many hours and require multiple specialists. Meanwhile, word of the incident spread throughout the academy faster than any official announcement could travel. Students gathered in small groups, sharing eyewitness accounts and trying to understand what they had seen. The security footage became the most watched video in academy history. Hyun sat in his dormitory room watching the clip for the 20th time. Each viewing revealed new details about the incredible speed and power of Mina's response. Her movement was so fluid it looked like a dance, but the results were purely destructive. His roommate Dae came in looking pale and shaken after visiting friends who had been in the cafeteria. "The stories just keep getting worse," he said, sitting heavily on his bed. "Some people are saying she could have killed him easily if she wanted to." Hyun paused the video at the moment of impact. Mina's expression was completely calm and focused, like someone solving a simple math problem. There was no anger or hatred in her face, just cold, professional efficiency. What kind of world creates people like this, Dae wondered aloud. How dangerous must Earth be if this is how humans learn to defend themselves? The Academy administration was asking the same questions in an emergency meeting that had been called within hours of the incident. Principal Chang sat at the head of a conference, table surrounded by department heads, security officers, and legal advisors. Everyone looked nervous and uncertain about how to proceed. "We have never dealt with anything like this," Principal Chang admitted. "The student handbook has no procedures for interspecies assault cases involving this level of injury. We need guidance from the Galactic Council immediately." The security chief, a grizzled Corvin named Commander Park, spoke up with obvious concern. "Ma'am, we need to consider whether this human student poses an ongoing threat to Academy safety. The level of violence we witnessed was extreme by any standard, but the legal advisor disagreed with this assessment. According to the footage, she only acted in self-defense after being physically attacked first. Under galactic law, her response was technically justified, even if the results were more severe than expected." The debate continued for hours as different officials weighed in on various aspects of the situation. Some wanted Mina expelled immediately, while others argued that punishing her for defending herself would set a dangerous precedent. The complexity of interspecies relations made every decision potentially controversial. News of the incident began, reaching parents and government officials throughout the galaxy. Many species had always been nervous about allowing humans into civilized institutions, and this event seemed to confirm their worst fears. Emergency diplomatic meetings were called on several worlds. Back in the medical wing, Dr. Yoon began the delicate process of reconstructing Tyke's shattered face. The surgery required synthetic bone grafts, advanced tissue regeneration techniques, and precision implants that would take months to fully integrate. The operating team worked in careful silence, knowing that one mistake could leave him permanently disfigured. 6 hours into the procedure, they discovered additional complications. The force of the impact had caused internal bleeding in areas they had not expected. Microfractures extended deeper into the skull than their initial scans had shown. What should have been a routine reconstruction became a battle to save his life. Students throughout the academy waited anxiously for news about Tyke's condition. Despite his reputation as a bully, no one wanted to see him die from his injuries. The possibility that a simple cafeteria fight could turn fatal made everyone realize how dangerous their new human classmate truly was. Jin and Wook sat in the hospital waiting area, looking lost and frightened. Their leader, who had seemed invincible, was fighting for his life because he had underestimated someone half his size. The gang they had belonged to was finished, and they knew it. "We should have stopped him," Wook said quietly. Something about that human was different from the beginning. The way she moved, the way she looked at things. "We should have seen the warning signs." Jin nodded miserably as he remembered how casual Mina had seemed about surviving on a world that would kill most species instantly. They had heard all the stories about humans and Death-Worlders, but had never taken them seriously until now. Dr. Yoon emerged from the operating room 12 hours after the surgery began. His surgical team looked exhausted from the marathon procedure, but they had managed to save Taek's life. The reconstruction would require additional operations over the coming months, but he would survive. "The injuries are stabilized," Dr. Yoon announced, to the waiting families. "However, he will need extensive rehabilitation and may never fully recover his previous appearance or abilities. This was one of the most severe cases of assault trauma I have ever treated." Principal Chang received the medical report with mixed feelings. She was relieved that no student had died on her campus, but troubled by the implications of what had occurred. The academy would never be the same after this day. As news of Taek's survival spread throughout the academy, students began to truly understand what they were dealing with. Mina had held back significantly during the fight. She could have killed him easily, but had chosen restraint instead. This realization was somehow even more frightening than if she had simply been out of control. The human student had demonstrated that she possessed the power to destroy anyone who threatened her, but also the discipline to limit that destruction. She was not a mindless monster, but a precise and controlled predator who could choose exactly how much damage to inflict. The Academy's comfortable illusion of safety had been shattered in 3 seconds of violence. Every student now knew that. They shared their campus with someone who could end their life as easily as swatting an insect. The question was not whether Mina was dangerous, but whether she could be trusted to continue showing restraint. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as the Academy administration tried to figure out how to handle their first human student. The IDS galaxy was watching to see whether Death-Worlders could truly coexist with civilized species, or whether this incident proved they were too dangerous for integration. One thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same at Galactic Academy again. Dr. Kang arrived at Galactic Academy 3 days after the incident, carrying classified research files that would change everyone's understanding of what they were dealing with. The renowned xenobiologist had spent decades studying Death World species for the Galactic Council, and his findings about humans were more disturbing than anyone had imagined. Principal Chang met him at the Academy's main entrance, looking haggard from days of emergency meetings and angry communications from parents across the galaxy. The incident had created a diplomatic crisis that threatened to close human integration programs permanently. "Thank you for coming so quickly, Dr. Kang," she said as they walked toward her office. "We need to understand exactly what kind of creature we have allowed onto our campus. The safety of our students depends on accurate information." Dr. Kang nodded grimly as he reviewed the security footage on his portable device. The casual efficiency of Mina's attack confirmed everything his research had suggested about human capabilities. The galaxy had severely underestimated what evolution on a Class T2 Death World could produce. "Principal Chang, we need to understand that this human student showed remarkable restraint during that confrontation," he explained as they entered her private office. "If she had used her full capabilities, that boy would not have survived." The principal stared at him in shock. "You mean she was holding back?" Dr. Kang asked. "Those injuries looked severe enough to be life-threatening." Dr. Kang opened his research files and spread detailed charts across the conference table. The data painted a picture of human evolution that was both fascinating and terrifying. Earth's extreme conditions had created beings that were essentially biological weapons disguised as ordinary people. Let me explain what makes humans so dangerous. He began pointing to anatomical diagrams. Their bone density is approximately 3 times greater than most galactic species. Their muscle fibers can generate force levels that would require mechanical enhancement for other beings to achieve. The charts showed comparative strength measurements between humans and other species. Even an average human could easily overpower the strongest members of most civilized races. Their reflexes were faster, their endurance was greater, and their pain tolerance was beyond comprehension. But the physical advantages are only part of the story, Dr. Kang continued. Humans evolved as apex predators on a world filled with creatures that would terrify most galactic citizens. Their entire psychology is shaped by millions of years of survival against impossible odds. He pulled up images of Earth's wildlife that made Principal Chang gasp in horror. Creatures with massive teeth and claws roamed the same environment where humans had developed their civilization. Animals that could kill most galactic species with ease were considered normal wildlife on the human homeworld. This tiger weighs over 300 kilograms and can leap incredible distances to attack prey, Dr. Kang explained, showing a picture that looked like something from a nightmare. Humans share their planet with hundreds of predators like this. They had to become more dangerous than everything else just to survive. The environmental data was equally shocking. Earth's weather patterns included frozen precipitation that could kill exposed individuals within hours. Temperature variations that would require environmental suits for most species were considered seasonal changes by humans. The atmospheric pressure alone would crush many galactic citizens. Look at this analysis of the human student strike. Dr. Kang said, pulling up, slow-motion footage enhanced with force measurement overlays. She generated approximately 2,000 pounds of pressure focused into a space smaller than her fist. Most species would need industrial equipment to produce similar results. But here is what should really concern you. He continued, highlighting specific frames. She delivered that force with surgical precision, striking at the exact angle needed to cause maximum damage without killing her target. This was not luck or accident, but trained technique. Principal Chang felt sick as she realized the implications. "You are saying she could have killed that student easily?" she whispered. "Not just easily," Dr. Kang replied. "If she had struck with full force at a slightly different angle, the victim's head would have separated from his body completely. The medical team estimates she used less than 15% of her maximum capability." The research files contained even more disturbing information about human society and culture. What other species considered extreme violence was normal conflict resolution for humans. Their entertainment media featured levels of combat that would be classified as torture by galactic standards. Humans do not see their world as hostile, Dr. Kang explained. They see it as home. The environmental pressures that created them also gave them a psychological framework that treats extreme danger as routine experience. What terrifies us is simply Tuesday morning for them. He showed footage of human children playing games that would hospitalize young members of other species. Their casual approach to physical contact and competition revealed just how different their development was from civilized galactic norms. The most frightening aspect is their capacity for controlled violence, Dr. Kang continued. Other predator species tend toward emotional outbursts or instinctive responses. Humans can make calm, calculated decisions about exactly how much damage to inflict and why. Principal Chang reviewed the incident footage again with this new understanding. Mina's expression during the confrontation now looked even more chilling. She had evaluated the threat, assessed her options, and delivered exactly the amount of force needed to end the conflict without causing permanent disability. "What are we supposed to do with this information, Dr. Kang?" she asked. "How can we possibly integrate beings like this into civilized society?" The xenobiologist closed his files and looked directly at her. "Principal Chang, the human student has already demonstrated that integration is possible. She could have killed Her attacker but chose not to. She used the minimum force necessary to defend herself and stopped the moment the threat was neutralized. This was the key insight that would reshape galactic policy toward Deathworld species. Humans were not mindless monsters, but intelligent beings capable of moral reasoning and self-control. Their capacity for violence was matched by their ability to choose when and how to use it. The Galactic Council's emergency session later that day would be dominated by Dr. Kang's research findings. Representatives from dozens of species debated whether humans should be banned from civilized institutions or welcomed as potential allies. Some argued that beings with such destructive capabilities could never be trusted in peaceful environments. Others pointed out that the human student had shown remarkable restraint and could have caused much worse damage if she had chosen to do so. The debate would continue for weeks, but the evidence was clear. Humans were the most dangerous sentient species the galaxy had ever encountered, but they were also capable of choosing not to use that danger. The question was whether civilized society could learn to coexist with such beings. Back at the academy, students were coming to their own conclusions about their human classmate. The security footage, hey. When Mina returns to classes after her suspension, the entire academy atmosphere has changed. Students no longer whisper about her in fear, they whisper in awe. The casual way she navigates daily life, from easily opening doors that require mechanical assistance for other species to unconsciously adjusting her movements to avoid accidentally injuring classmates, becomes a source of fascination rather than terror. Hyun, who had been curious about humans from the beginning, approaches Mina during lunch to apologize for the behavior of his fellow students. Their conversation reveals that Mina never intended to cause such severe injuries. On Earth, her response would have been considered remarkably restrained. She explains that human children learn to control their strength from an early age to avoid accidentally hurting each other during play. The Academy implements new cultural exchange programs, with Mina sharing stories about Earth's beauty alongside its dangers. Students learn that humans don't see their world as hostile. They see it as home. The same environmental pressures that forged them into galactic super soldiers also gave them an appreciation for life's resilience and beauty that few other species can match. Tyke eventually returns to classes with a reconstructed face and a completely changed attitude. His near-death experience and weeks of recovery gave him time to reflect on his behavior, and he publicly apologizes to Mina and his previous victims. The incident becomes a turning point for Academy culture, with bullying incidents dropping dramatically as students realize that strength should be used to protect rather than intimidate. By the end of the semester, Mina has become something of a celebrity throughout the galactic education system. Her academic performance, combined with her demonstration of human capabilities and restraint, opens doors for other human students to attend galactic institutions. She graduates as valedictorian, proving that Deathworlders can excel not just in survival, but in civilization itself. The story ends with Mina accepting an offer to stay at the Academy as a cultural ambassador, helping bridge the gap between humanity and the galactic community. Her presence serves as a reminder that the most dangerous beings in the galaxy can also be the most valuable allies, as long as they're treated with respect rather than hostility. The Academy's new motto, displayed prominently in the main hall, reads, "Strength without honor is tyranny. Honor without strength is meaningless."